The clock stopped at 3:15 a.m., the exact time my grandmother died, and it was the only thing that had ever done that. I inherited her antique clock shop the day she passed, and for the first time in 10 years, the grandfather clock in the corner of the shop began ticking. But it didn't tick forward. It stopped. The hands froze at 3:15, the same time she died in a car accident. My hands shook as I reached for the key. The clock had been running for a century, but it had been silent for 10 years. Now, it was speaking. The silence was the most terrifying thing I'd ever felt. What if the clock was telling me something? What if it had been waiting for me? I turned the key, and the clock began to run backwards. I had to know what it was trying to tell me. The clock ran backwards, showing me the moment before my grandmother died. I saw the headlights of the car, the rain, the driver's face, a man I didn't recognize. I was 10 years old, watching my grandmother run into the street. Then, the clock stopped again at 3:15. My grandmother's death was happening again, but in reverse. The clock wasn't just telling me about her death. It was showing me the moment before it happened. I realized it was counting down to my next death. My mother died 3 years ago in a drowning, the same time the clock stopped. The clock had been speaking to me all along. It wasn't a memory. It was a countdown. I had to find out why it was doing this. The clock stopped at 3:15 again, but this time it was my mother's death. I found a hidden journal in the shop's attic, pages stained with time. The handwriting was mine, but the date was 1923. My great-grandmother had written, "The clock stops at the death of the next generation." My grandmother died in 1933. My mother died in 2023. The clock was counting down to me. I had to find out why it was stopping at 3:15. The journal revealed my great-grandmother was a time traveler who sacrificed herself to become the clock. She had died in 1923 to prevent a time loop that would kill every generation. Now, the clock was the only thing that could stop it, but it was running backwards, showing me my death. I saw my great-grandmother in a rain-soaked alley in 123. She was holding a small clock, her face pale with fear. A man in a trench coat stood behind her. She turned, her eyes wide with determination. "This clock will save us," she whispered. Then she dropped the clock. It shattered into pieces. The rain fell harder. I was 10 years old, watching my grandmother die. Now, the clock was showing me the same moment, but in reverse. My great-grandmother had sacrificed herself to become the clock. She had been the one who died in 1923. Now, the clock was running backwards to show me my death. I had to stop it before it was too late. The clock was counting down to my death, but it was also counting up. Every time it stopped at 3:15, a family member died. My grandmother in 1933, my mother in 2023, and now me in 2024. The clock was the only thing that could stop the time loop. But the loop was real. I was trapped in it. I could see my death coming, the same moment I saw my grandmother die in 1933. The clock was showing me the moment before death, but it was running backwards. I had to break the loop before it was too late. I realized the clock wasn't just a clock. It was a time capsule that held the memories of every generation. My great-grandmother sacrificed herself to become the clock. She died in 1923 to prevent a time loop that would kill every generation. She had been the only one who could stop the loop. But she failed. The clock was the only thing that could stop it, but it was running backwards. I had to become the great-grandmother to break the loop. The clock was showing me the moment before death, but it was my own death. I had to stop it before it was too late. The clock was counting down to my death, but it was also counting up. I realized I was the next in line to become the great-grandmother. The clock was counting down to my death in 24 hours. The hands were moving backwards, showing me the moment before death. I could see myself falling into the river, the same moment my mother died. The clock was running backwards, but it was also counting down to my death. I had to break the loop before it was too late. I realized I was the great-grandmother's daughter, the next in line to become the clock. The clock had been waiting for me. Now, it was my turn. I had to choose, stop the clock and die, or become the great-grandmother and break the loop. I had to choose, stop the clock before I die or become the great-grandmother. The clock was showing me the moment before death, but it was also showing me my birth. The clock had been waiting for me. Now, it was my turn. I could stop it and die, or become the great-grandmother. I thought about my great-grandmother. She had sacrificed herself to become the clock. Now, I had to do the same. I reached for the key. The clock began to run backwards again. I had to make the choice before it was too late. I became the great-grandmother. I stepped into the clock, and the world changed. The rain stopped. The alley was empty. My great-grandmother stood there, her eyes filled with hope. "This clock will save us," she whispered. Then she turned to me, her hand on my shoulder. "You are the next great-grandmother." The clock ran forward. I was 10 years old again, watching my grandmother run into the street. But this time, I was the one who stopped the car. The time loop broke. The clock stopped at 3:15, but it was the moment of my birth. I was the great-grandmother. The clock stopped at 3:15, but this time it was my birth. I was standing in the alley, the rain falling, the clock in my hands. I was the great-grandmother. I had broken the time loop. The clock was running forward now. I saw my grandmother running into the street. I was the one who stopped the car. The time loop was over. I had become the great-grandmother. The clock was the only thing that remembered, and now it remembered me. The clock ran forward for the first time. I was 10 years old again, but this time it was different. I saw my grandmother run into the street. I stepped in front of the car. The rain stopped. The clock was silent. I had broken the time loop. I was the great-grandmother. The clock stopped at 3:15, but this time it was the moment of my birth. The time loop was over. The clock stopped at 3:15, but this time it was me. I was the great-grandmother. The time loop was over. The clock ran forward for the first time. I had become the great-grandmother. The clock was silent. I was alive. The clock ran forward with me. The time loop was over. I was the great-grandmother. The clock was silent. I was alive. The clock ran forward for the first time. I had broken the loop. The clock stopped at 3:15, but this time it was me. I was the great-grandmother. The time loop was over. The clock ran forward for the first time. I had become the great-grandmother. The clock stopped at 3:15, but this time it was the moment of my birth. I was alive.